Thank you. Thank you. In the next few minutes, I hope to provide those of you in the studio audience and those of you watching at home with some of the uplifting types of insights that can not only make your life better, but the lives of those around you. In one of my books, entitled Let Us Make Man, I addressed an often overlooked part of the creation story, that man was made to evolve, not to merely exist, to go beyond what is expected, to leave no room for doubt, and to leave the world a better place. Each of us is expected to improve our own lives, physically, mentally, socially, and spiritually. We're expected to use all the resources at our disposal in order to achieve this noble objective. And that objective is to obtain the beautifully balanced life, right here on earth, right here, right now. And there's a scriptural basis for this. We will talk about that in just a few moments. Every successful journey begins with an end in sight. To that end, let us set out to discovering how to become the person that we were intended to be, inside and out, and regardless of the age at which we begin the process. Now, there are several components to the beautifully balanced life, and we're going to address each one of those. How we look, how fit and how healthy we are, how we perform our daily activities, how happy we tend to be, how long we live, and how successful we are, and the fulfillment that we enjoy out of life. Now, the challenge that each of us has is to be able to balance each of these components. You see, we're expected to dream great dreams. We're also expected to balance reality with those dreams. We're expected to see the big picture and what our role in it is. We're expected to appreciate beauty and to connect with the world around us, and in turn, with the universe as a whole. You know, one of the objectives in life should be to earn the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to withstand the vile of our critics, and to endure the betrayal of false friends. We're expected to persevere in the face of adversity, to survive, to prosper, and to provide for those who are important in our lives. In the end, we're expected to leave the world a better place than we found it. Now, many of us know the quotation of Confucius, that every journey begins with a single step. Well, there's a value, or there is value in a good start. First impressions count. As a matter of fact, Aristotle was the first to note this. Aristotle wrote that a pleasing appearance is more important than any letter of introduction. When I stop for a minute and think about that, if you were applying for a job and you walked in and had a letter in your pocket from a very prominent individual recommending you for that job, that would be very important in your ability to obtain that job. But what Aristotle said is the way you look when you walk through the door is more important than the content of that letter. Over the next few minutes, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Now, how do we connect with the world? I mentioned earlier that that's one of our expectations. We connect with the world because they judge us. The world judges us by how we look, by what we know, by what we can do with the people or by the people with whom we associate, how we deal with both adversity and how we deal with change, and finally, how we finish the journey or the contest. Now, you hear a lot about change these days, but change has consequences. So we have to ask ourselves, does it need to be changed? And what are the consequences of that change? And if we're going to change it, why are we out to change it? Well, in this journey, we're going to be tested. And we're going to be tested to see how we can sort out all of the distractions that come our way. We're expected to learn from the past and to plan ahead, to deal effectively with detours, with delays, with setbacks, and with failure. And there are those who would go to great extremes to try to throw us off course. We have to be aware of these people. We have to make sure that we focus on our mission, but we also still have to enjoy the scenery along the way. Now, there's a story that speaks to this. The story is about a lady who gets on the train. She immediately begins to put her hat in the right place. She immediately begins to put her luggage in the right place. And then she goes to the restroom and she comes back and she's dealing around with everything in her surroundings. And the next thing you know, the conductor calls out her station. And the lady said, you know what? If I'd known the ride was going to be this short, I would have paid more attention to the scenery. Well, that's the way life is. We don't know how long the journey is going to be. So we can't get distracted by the little things in our lives. We have to stay focused on the mission, but we also have to enjoy the scenery. We have the responsibility, not just of existing, but becoming the very best that we can be. A beautifully balanced life is really based upon the artful balancing of self-worth with self-absorption. Now, in my profession, I'm often asked, well, if I do this or that to myself, isn't that considered vanity? No, I think vanity is a different thing. Vanity, in my opinion, is when a person is so obsessed with his or her appearance that it distracts or detracts from their ability to function in society. But there's a difference in self-worth. And once again, there's a scriptural basis for this. There's a verse in the Bible that tells us, unto whom much is given, much is expected. And then there is the story of the talents. You remember the master gave 3 different servants different talents. The one he gave 3, the one he gave 2, the other he gave 1, and he went away. He came back later, and the one that he had given 3 talents to had multiplied them. And the master was very pleased with his performance. The one he had given 2 talents to had gone out and multiplied those talents. The master was pleased. The servant that he had given 1 talent to said, I was afraid I would lose it, so I hid it under a bushel. And he said, get out of my sight. I don't want to see you. So we are told and we are expected that it's our responsibility to multiply the God-given talents that each of us has. Now, when we begin to think about seeing ourselves as others see us, we have to look back into history as well. Now, there was a doctor in the late 1890s whose name was James Allen. Dr. Allen wrote probably the original self-help book upon which all other self-help books have been based. The name of the book is As a Man Thinketh. There's a profound statement in that book. The body is the servant of the mind. And so we talked earlier about the physical aspect of living life well. But now let's talk a little bit about the mental aspect of that. Because if the body is the servant of the mind, all good things have to begin in our mind. First of all, a winning attitude. Do we believe that we are a winner or a loser in life? And are we committed to doing the kinds of things that make us winners? And as we go along, winners don't always win. Winners sometimes fail, but they win more than they fail. And the key is to be able to deal effectively with both success and failure. Now, in terms of how the world judges us, they judge us in many ways. By how we stand, by how we sit, by how we present ourselves when we come into a room. By our countenance, by the way we are. As a matter of fact, one of my teachers was Coach Paul Bear Bryant. And Coach Bryant used to tell us, when we started to leave the dressing room after every game, it mattered not whether we won or we lost. And most of the time we won. But whether we won or we lost, he said, when you leave this dressing room and you go to the bus, all those people out there should never know whether you won or lost the game. You win with pride in class, you lose with pride in class. Because if you think of yourself as a winner and you conduct yourself as a winner, more than likely you will be a winner. Another one of my teachers had good advice. He said, if you would aspire to be president, now he wasn't talking about president of the United States, he was talking about president of a medical society. But he said, if you aspire to be president, start today. Act presidential. act as though you are a president. And whenever people start looking for someone to lead them, your name or your face will come to mind. And so that's true in whatever we do. If we aspire to be successful, begin to act successful today. Our disposition counts. You know, you see so many people walking around with frowns on their face, but people really don't want to be associated with people who are always frowning. It's what I call the $1 million smile. You can go anywhere in the world and you might not be able to speak the language, but if you encounter someone and you smile, you generally get a smile back, do you not? You've connected. You've connected with the world. You've connected with somebody you didn't know. So smiles are important. Grooming, how clean we are, how we do our hair, how we makeup, accessories, clothing, wardrobe, all of that is important. And then the other thing that I refer to as the inner beauty, and that's character. Who you are when no one else is watching. That is so important, because if someone begins to think about being associated with you, whether it's as a friend or whether it's as a business associate, if they think you're honest and trustworthy, you're going to be attracted, or they're going to be attracted to you. Our weight, how well we appear to be, how healthy we appear to be, how fit we are. That shows that we pay attention to all those little things, and we're willing to go beyond what is ordinarily expected. And then finally, the proportional beauty. Now, this is the kind of beauty that you see on the covers of magazines and on television and in the movies. And that's the very last thing that I mentioned, because that has a lot to do with our genetics. But all of the things that I've mentioned before, how we stand, how we sit, whether we have a pleasing disposition, our grooming, our wardrobe, and our character, and our weight, and how fit we are, all of those things we can do something about starting today, right now. It doesn't cost us anything to do that. We can begin today on that journey. The first step, the first impression begins today. And we begin with the simplest. Start with the simplest and work your way forward. Now, sometimes people say, well, is there really scientific evidence about why it pays to pay attention to your appearance? Yes, there is. There's a psychologist from over in Atlanta, Georgia, whose name is Perry Buffington. Dr. Buffington has really spent his career researching and studying the relationship between how one looks and the level of success that he or she tends to enjoy in life. Dr. Buffington concluded after years of research that although definitions of beauty have varied down through the ages, favors have always been granted to beautiful or handsome people. Now, I know that that's not politically correct, but human nature is human nature, and we'll never be able to pass laws to overcome what human nature is. So in the game of life, the world gives us no more than we expect of ourselves, nor from it. Buffington also showed that better-looking job applicants, now here's the key, if all of the qualifications are equal, are more likely to be hired. Here was the study that he did. He created a fictitious resume. Very impressive, but totally fictitious. And he put the resume into 2 big stacks. And he had a lady in his neighborhood agree to come in just as she rolled out of bed one morning. She put her house coat on, drove right straight to the office. She walked in and they took her photograph. And then they took her down the hall and they did one of these makeovers on her. Then they brought her back after she'd been made up and her hair fixed and accessories and dressed to the nines, and they took another set of photographs. So he took the pre-made up photographs and attached them to this set of resumes, the after made up photograph and attached them to this set of resumes. Now, which one do you think got the most callbacks? Absolutely, the better looking applicant. Qualifications equal, the better looking applicant tends to get the nod. Now, he also showed, very interestingly, that better-looking students tend to get better grades in school. And I could understand the first one and the second one, but the third one was that better-looking mental patients tend to have shorter stays in mental institutions and fewer readmissions. So I didn't understand this one. I called him on it. And he said, well, what we found is that the patient who gets up in the morning, gets dressed, goes to the lobby, and interacts with the other patients, also the staff sees that they're trying. They're putting forth an effort. And so they tend to pay more attention to them. And so it makes a great difference in terms of how we look. But just in case you're still not yet convinced, let me share with you some of the letters and comments that I've received down through the years from patients who actually either went through appearance-enhancing procedures or maybe their spouse did. We're going to start with one from a gentleman named Winston. Winston is a baseball umpire, and he's agreed to let me share this with you. He's a big guy, and when Winston walks into a room, he commands attention. So he comes in one day and he hands me this letter. I'm going to just read some excerpts from the letter. He said, "My wife's new look, well, it's nothing short of miraculous. She carries her head high again. She has a spring in her step. Her heart sings every morning when she gets in front of the mirror. Her self-confidence is back. We are enjoying the best years of our marriage. I'm not sure that husbands realize how much their lives would be enhanced if their wives had appearance-enhancing surgery." And the world took note of the fact that they did. Now, the rest of the story is this. Winston's wife was an educator. She was reaching a retirement age and planning to retire. She learned that one of the highest executive positions in her profession nationally was available. So rather than working toward retirement, she applied for the job, and she got it. And it was a job that paid very, very well. So rather than going into retirement, she had an additional 5-year contract. So when you start looking at the big picture now, you look at the physical, her appearance was improved, her psychological aspects were improved, her marriage improved, her world improved, and their financial condition improved as well. This is just one of the examples. Now let's talk a little bit about some of the other physical components of a beautifully balanced life. What to do when the image in the mirror no longer matches that one inside. This beautiful lady is with us today, sitting here on the front row, and Andrea has given me permission to share her story and use her photographs. At this stage, Andrea was beginning to be unhappy with what she saw in the mirror. She was beginning to have some droops and sags in the lower portion of her face and looking tired. Well, we did a little bit of work, a little nip and tuck, but when you start with a beautiful subject, all you got to do is polish it up just a little bit. So we did a neck lift and a cheek lift and a little bit of work around her eyes. I shaved a little bit of the hump off her nose. And then, of course, with makeup and accessories, hairstyling, it made a huge difference. She told me when she came in, now this is the way that I have felt inside for a long time, but it hadn't been what I've been seeing in the mirror. So Andrea, thank you for allowing us to share your story, not only with the audience, but with all of the people at home. Now, many times our biggest challenge in life is to overcome the kinds of things that hold us back. And if what holds us back is a particular feature or part of our body that is out of proportion that makes us unhappy with ourselves, there are things that we can do to enhance it. This is a young lady from the Middle East. And when she moved to the United States, she wanted to have her nose to fit more into what she saw in her class. So we took the hump off her nose, just made her nose a little bit smaller just to bring it in proportion with the rest of her face. And so not only did her appearance improve, her self-confidence improved. Here's a lady whose lower part of her nose was out of proportion to the rest of her face. You see, when you extend a line straight down from the inner corner of the eye, ideally no part of the nose should flare out past that imaginary line. So her nose was a little long. We shortened the nose and we narrowed it up at the base. So now everything fits. Beauty is harmony. There are many, many definitions to beauty, but they all include harmony. So whenever you can get things balanced, then everything looks better. Now let's talk a little bit about the psychological component of the beautifully balanced life. And I call this one breaking out of a shell. This lady got not only a physical boost, but a psychological boost. And it's a very interesting story, is the reason I wanted to share it with you. She presented to my office some years ago, and you can see that not much attention to her hairstyle, not much attention to makeup, a very plain blouse, and no accessories. At this point in time, I said to her, after we talked for about 20 minutes, now let's go down the hall and we'll take some photographs. And she said, oh no, I don't have my pictures taken. I said, well, ma'am, I've got to take your photographs. I'm going to consider doing surgery on you. She said, I don't have my pictures taken by anybody, anywhere, anytime. So after about 10 or 15 minutes of debating, she finally said, okay. Well, we went down the hall and we took her photographs. Now, what we did the next day is we did a little bit of work in here, some liposuction, a little bit of contouring, a little tightening, and we made her lips larger. That's all we did. 6 months later, she walks in the office, and this is how she comes in. Notice the attention to her wardrobe. Notice her makeup. Notice she's got on diamond studs, and she's got a nicely coiffured hairstyle. But that's only part of the story. She said, Dr. McCollough, I read in the paper, she's from Washington, D.C. She said, I read in the paper where they were doing a James Bond movie in Washington, and they were looking for some extras to be part of a wedding ceremony at the beginning of the movie. So I decided I would go try out. I went out there and I tried out, and I got the part. Now here's the story. Here's a person that would not allow me to take her photograph in a controlled medical setting. And after a small amount of surgery, but here's the key, a tremendous amount of psychological support, not only from me, but from my entire staff. And that's the key. You've got to have people around you that understand what you're trying to accomplish. The entire staff started working on building her self-esteem. Now then, she goes out there and competes with hundreds of other people in front of a movie camera for a part, and she got it. So if you see a James Bond movie and there's a wedding at the beginning of the movie, she's in it. You know, you hear the old saying sometimes, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, sometimes words do hurt. I'm going to tell you the story now of a girl called Ears. It was an image-destroying swimming party that this lady attended. She came in to have her ears reduced in size. She was afraid of anesthesia, we talked about before the show a little bit. So we decided to do her under local anesthesia with minimal sedation. So I'm about halfway through the operation and she begins to cry. And I stopped immediately and I said, am I hurting you? And she said, no, I'm not hurting me. And I said, well, why are you crying? And she said, because I'm so happy. I just put my instruments down and I said, tell me about it. So she said, Dr. McCollough, I went to a swimming party when I was 11 years old. I got out of the water, my hair was wet, and my ears stuck out from my hair. And one of my classmates looked at me and said, oh my God, look at those ears. My entire class turned and looked at me, and from that day forward, I was called Ears. She said, I've just now gotten a position to have them corrected. And she said, I went out last week. I've not been in a swimming pool since I was 11 years old. But last week, I went out and bought myself 3 brand new bathing suits, and I can't wait to get in the water. So sometimes the message here is that you look at another individual and they are considering having something done to change their appearance and their lives in a positive fashion, and your response might be, oh, no, you don't need that. That's not what they need to hear. Because something that you may seem to be a small thing to them is the entire world. It affects how they react to the world and how they respond to the world. We're going to talk about that again in a few moments. But now this is not the same patient, but this is the kinds of things that we see. Here's a young child with ears that stick out, and if you notice, they're not exactly the same. All we did was just to bring her ears back to a normal position, nothing beyond that, just to correct the problem. And so oftentimes I'm asked, when do you need to correct this? Well, the ear is 90% its adult size by the time a child reaches the age of 6. So we recommend that before they start to school, before they pick up these nicknames, Ears, Dumbo, other kinds of things, have them corrected at that time. Let's talk a little bit about scars. Sometimes the physical scars that you see on people's faces and bodies are obvious, but oftentimes the scars deep into their psyche are much more difficult to erase. Now let's look at a young lady who had an accident. You can see that here a large scar comes across her forehead and her brow. Well, after several different procedures, what we did first of all is we took this scar out and converted it to a zigzag. And then we used some cortisone to soften this. And then later we came back in and we dermabrased it. We're going to talk about dermabrasion a little bit more later. But dermabrasion is a sanding procedure where you buff down the edges. And you can see with these types of procedures, the scar doesn't go away, but it's not noticeable. It blends into the surrounding tissue. Let's look at another one. This is a professional person. He was a judge, and he had an accident, and the scar came across his lower lid margin, and his lid was pulled away from the eyeball so that the natural tears that he produced rolled out onto his cheek. And so he came in and he said, "Doc, you know, I'm sitting on the bench, and the two lawyers are up there arguing back and forth, and I'm sitting there wiping tears off my cheek." And he said, I don't want them to think that I'm sympathetic to their cause and crying. And so his really fell into the category of what we call a functional correction. And it's these types of situations where insurance does kick in and helps cover some of the costs. Now, the next slide I want to show you, the next case, is a young girl with severe acne. And if any of you have ever experienced it yourself or had children that experienced acne, it can be a terribly devastating thing. And she had been treated by the dermatology department at a large university for several years, unable to clear up her acne. And we came in and did what we call a dermabrasion procedure, where we smoothed down the skin. And not only did it help improve her acne, it improved some of the acne scars. Now, we know that the society has really come to understand that appearance does count. There have been a lot of books and articles and lectures similar to this one on why appearance counts. So people are out there looking for the kinds of things that can make them look better, enhance their appearance. But unfortunately, we're in an era where there's tremendous commercialization of appearance-enhancing surgery and procedures. Today, more than ever, it's important, I think, that consumers begin to investigate the claims of too good to be true alternatives aimed at improving your appearance and or reversing the signs of aging. And almost every day there's a new magic formula or a new device that comes out, and you have to be a little cautious about that. This actually was taken from a major newspaper. I won't name the name of the newspaper, but it was an advertisement. You can see this lady with all these pins stuck in her face. And the legend underneath it, which I've pulled over here, says she looks like a hedgehog, but this woman is actually receiving a painless acupuncture facelift that's cheaper, safer, and just as effective as old-fashioned cosmetic surgery. Well, there's no doubt that after she had all of these needles stuck in her face, that her face didn't swell up quite a bit, and some of the little fine lines disappeared for about 48 hours. But the idea that you can stick needles into the face and tighten the skin or remove fatty tissue just doesn't stand to reason. So there are many things that we learn growing up. But I know growing up back in rural Alabama, we were told if it sounds too good to be true, it generally is. Well, there are oftentimes what I call too good to be true lifts. And a really good rule for the public to remember is this, is that if there's a name in front of the word lift, then it generally is a commercial procedure. And it's really important to look into the operator's experience and also beyond the advertiser's claims, because many of those procedures aren't effective and don't tend to last very long, and many times the money is not well spent. And there are other, what I call cosmetic myths that we need to be aware of today. Downtime is a big term that's thrown around a lot whenever people are talking about procedures. Rule of thumb, no downtime, no long-term result. Another thing is you see advertisements about things that dissolve fat away without surgery. Be very cautious about that. Yes, it may dissolve little tiny spots, but they can leave you with some serious problems. And then whenever you're hearing people talking about correcting problems without scars, also be very cautious about that. No scars, generally speaking, no result. Now that's not true with liposuction, because you make little tiny incisions and you can remove the fatty tissue. Youthful, beautiful skin has been one of mankind's or womankind's objectives for years and years and years. And there are many ways that you can improve the quality and texture of your skin. Most of you are familiar with some of them: lasers, chemical peels, and dermabrasions. But now underneath those three big categories, there are subcategories. And when you see the word micro in front of one of these procedures, what that generally means is it's not deep enough to create permanent changes. The micro procedures are generally skin polishers. They make the skin look a little better, like furniture polish makes an older piece of furniture look better for a couple of weeks, but then the results are not long-lived. And so you need to go back and have them done over and over again. And then, of course, one of the buzz terms in our society today is the laser. If you throw the word laser in front of anything, the public assumes, oh, it's technology, it's greater, it's advanced, it's better than what's out there. Not necessarily, because the fact that it has laser behind it does not necessarily mean that it's better or that it's safer. A good rule of thumb to remember with any of these skin improvement procedures is unless it takes you 2 weeks to heal, you're generally not going to get any long-term results. Let's look at another example of this. Here's a lady who enjoyed the sun a lot when she was younger. And then as she began to get a little bit older, she started developing all of these, what I don't know, gentlemen down in Gulf Shores used to call barnacles. She started getting barnacles on her face. They started growing from everywhere. And so there's nothing that you can do, no cream you can rub on, nothing quick, simple, and easy. You've got to go to one of these procedures to literally resurface the skin and get down into the deeper layers of the skin so that it takes a minimum of 2 weeks to heal. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about what I call the appearance factor. How do you market yourself? If you want others to take a closer look at you and at what's inside, then it's important to create the most appealing package possible. The social and economic benefits of a beautifully balanced life cannot be understated or cannot be overstated. There are two examples of when opportunity took note, and I'd like to share with you a couple of unsolicited letters from patients. The first one is a young lady who presented to the clinic with a little hump on her nose. The tip was down. She had a small chin. Very, very low self-esteem. We did a little work to lift the tip up and put a small implant in her chin. A few months later, I get a letter from her, and she's explaining how, with her self-confidence, she's getting more responsibility at work. She's got a promotion. Her income has gone up. She's more outgoing. She's sharing herself with other people. And then there is this letter. And I want to read this to you. I received this one just about 2 weeks ago. It starts out by saying, in July 2005, I came to your office feeling very insecure about the way I looked. But you, like my family, saw beyond my insecurities. To the vibrant young woman inside, before my nose surgery, I was always cautious about the way I positioned myself in a room, making sure that no one ever caught a glimpse of my profile. In college, I didn't involve myself in many on-campus activities because of having to consistently be aware of my nose. It was exhausting. I didn't date many guys, but instead stayed with the same dead-end comfort zone that I'd been in for the last 4 years. I'm happy to report that following my surgery, I rushed for, and I eliminated the name of the sorority, and graduated with honors. I gained many friends, and I was involved in many on-campus clubs and intramural activities, whereas before I always felt timid when working with patients. Following the surgery, I got a job in a dental clinic, which helped prepare me for where I am today. This vibrant woman is now attending the University of, and I left that out, College of Dentistry. I will be graduating in the spring of 2013, and I love what I'm doing. I've also met the man of my dreams, and we're getting married in March. One thing I look forward to is basking in the joy of that day and not having to worry about the angle that the pictures are taken from and who is looking at my nose instead of me. I've always been this girl, but now I have the courage to show her to the world. Now that's what makes me go to work every day. That's what the beautifully balanced life is all about. That's what we are trying to accomplish. we talked about here. She did it better than anything else I could say to you for the rest of this presentation. And I've got many more slides, and I've got other stories that I can tell you. But this lady brought it all home. She was concerned about something about her appearance. It affected her mental outlook. It affected her social outlook. It was going to affect her economic outlook on life. And so she decided to do something about it. Now, our role was minuscule in this. You know, we just modified our nose a little bit, but then she took it from there. And that's the key to it. Along the way, we all need those people who just simply reach down and give us a hand and pull us up out of the ditch a little bit, and then pat us on the back and say, go get them. And that's really what we all are here to do, and that is to help each other, to make our lives better. But as we make our lives better, we enrich the lives of other people around us. Now, we've talked about leaving the world a better place than we found it. But in order to do that, we have to connect with the world. Perhaps one of the greatest stories that exemplifies this connection is that of Helen Keller. Helen Keller was born deaf and blind and was therefore mute. But it was the belief of a teacher who continued to work with her and tried to help her connect with the world that caused Helen Keller to leave the world a better place than she found it. One day at a pump, when water was running over her hand, she eventually made the connection between this physical element of the earth and what it was her teacher was trying to get into her head. And then it was like turning a light on in a dark room. From that day forward, she began to learn very, very quickly. The child that was born deaf and mute and blind graduated with honors, wrote many books, traveled the world, taught people about what it is to overcome adversity. Well, she was one of the great individuals of all time. One of my favorite Helen Keller quotations is that I cannot do everything, but I can do something. What I can do, I should do. And with the help of Almighty God, I will do what I can do. And then I've added, and what I do, I will do it. So I leave no room for doubt. Now this lesson was taught to me and to my teammates in 1965 on a goal line in Miami, Florida. Alabama was playing the University of Texas. We had come from behind and we were on the 1 foot line. We were 5 points behind. A touchdown wins the game for us. My team goes to the line of scrimmage. We expect to win the game as we had always done. They called us the Cardiac Kids. 4th down, I snapped the ball to Joe Namath. There was a big clash at the goal line, and I started looking for Joe Namath. Found him in the goal line, in the end zone, holding the ball. He was a good 1.5 feet across the goal line. One official came in, raised his hand, called it a touchdown. Another official came in and said, "Did he score?" I couldn't tell. There was a big pileup. He said, "Sure, I scored. I took the ball away from him in the end zone." A third official came running from the sideline, grabbed the ball away from the first one, put it down, gave the ball to Texas, 1st down the other way. Overruled and nullified the touchdown. We lost the ball game. It was the last play I ever played for the University of Alabama. I tell this story in my book, The Long Shadow of Coach Paul Bear Bryant. The reason I tell that story is because Coach Bryant taught us, a group of 21 and 22-year-old boys, something that night that has become indelible in my mind and has driven me for the rest of my life. As we went to the sidelines, one of my teammates coming behind me turned to Coach Bryant and said, "Coach, we scored." He looked at the group of young men that night and he said these words: "If he had walked in, there'd have been no question about it." The lesson I learned that night on the goal line in Miami in 1965 is this: if you want to accomplish something in this world, you cannot do just enough to get the job done, because the world's referees might not make the right call either. You have to go beyond what is expected and leave no room for doubt. And that is how we will leave the world a better place than we found it. In Let Us Make Man, I addressed the keys to creating the beautifully balanced life, and how balancing expectations with achievement is not only a goal, but an expectation. There are things that I believe we can take away here today. And here are some of those things that I'd like to leave you with. What should we do? First, let's focus only on the positive thoughts. That's the mind-body connection. Remember, the body is the servant of the mind. I think it's important that early on in our journey we identify and visualize who and what we intend to be. And then we tend to follow the most direct route. Many people get lost going in all different directions, but think about the most direct route. To do that, we establish short-term, intermediate, and long-range plans. Not that we can't change or modify those plans, but at least we have to have a roadmap as we head out. An often overlooked key to being successful is to emulate successful people. You know, we learn by one or two methods, either by trial and error or by listening to people who already know the answers. Successful people know the answers to many of the questions that we have. And so the young person would really be wise to seek out successful people and try to emulate what they do as much as possible. We also need to choose the very best teachers, instructors, and mentors, and then to stand on their shoulders. There's a quotation that was written in a book called The Civil War, back in the Greek history days, where Didacus Stella said to his general, "Put the dwarves on the shoulders of giants. They can see farther than the giants." And so if we stand on the shoulders of giants, we can see farther, and that's a key to being successful. We need to listen to and heed what the best of the best has to teach us. Then we need to believe in ourselves, because if you don't believe in what you're about, no one else will believe in you either. But I think it's also as important as we go along to acknowledge the source of our strength, to aim high, to work harder and smarter than the competition. Now, there's a difference in working hard and working smart. Because if you are just simply stacking bricks from one place to the other, you're working hard, but have you really accomplished anything? So you need to have a goal and be smart as you work toward that goal, and to persevere in the face of adversity, because there are always potholes in life. To refuse to give in or to give up. Not that we're not knocked down, because we are. But the important thing is, do we stay down or do we get up, and do we keep coming back and we push against that rock and never give up? And as we go along, we have to ignore the distractions, like the story in the rock, where the passerby tried to distract the man from pushing on the rock and building up himself and finding the treasure underneath. But you know, to analyze where we are, what we've done, and the mistakes that we've made, that's the key to success. Once you do something, step back and analyze what you've done and see where your mistakes were and how you can make things better. And it's those people that are always looking to improve upon what they did yesterday that tend to go farther into living the beautifully balanced life. And then I think it's also important to exercise a bit of humility. When you reach your goals, never hesitate to give credit for those individuals who helped you along the way, those teachers who taught you, the people who encouraged you, even your critics, because your critics sometimes will make you step back and try harder and to prove them wrong. And so the key to the beautifully balanced life is really not a single key, but it's multiple keys, all of which, when added together, can create a beautiful something that is mankind. Are there any questions?
Yes, Dr. McCollough. Is it better when you're considering a facial surgery to try and keep up or try and catch up? Is there a good age to explore that?
Well, Andrew, the answer to the question is really not real simple, but I can get you there. I think there are two ways to look at appearance-enhancing surgery. One I call the preventative maintenance program, and the other I call the rejuvenation program. Now, many of you remember years ago, Phyllis Diller had a lot of surgery done. It looked great. Now, she told the whole world about her surgery, but she might as well have, because she waited so late in life to have everything done that the changes were drastic. On the other hand, there are a lot of people, and I won't mention their names, who probably started relatively early and had little things done all along, so they always looked better than their stated age. There are two ways to go about it, and it really depends upon when in your life you decide that it's the right thing for you to do. There are people who really, for financial reasons or perhaps life-altering, life-changing events that occur in their lives, they want to start over again with a new life, and that's the point that they come to have some appearance-enhancing surgery made. But if everything looks like it's on track, I think it's oftentimes better to start relatively early and have little things done along so you never really have to have a lot done. And in many ways, it's a lot more economical to do that as well. That answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And I think we have another question over here.
Yes, I had a question. You mentioned earlier that the younger you are when you start, it's not so drastic. If you start at a younger age, is it common to have to repeat the surgeries? And if so, how often?
You know, that's a great question. A lot of people are confused about that because you hear the fact that once you have surgery, you have to have it redone or have to have additional procedures. No, you don't. You have the same choice in the future that you had in the beginning, in that as time goes by, the ticking clock continues to move around. So we get a little bit older, but if you have the surgery done, it's permanent. And the fact that you will always appear younger than your chronological age. But as the clock moves along, you may very well have to have little nips and tucks or what we call spot welding done if you want to maintain that youthful look that you achieved with the first procedure.
Dr. McCollough, you do surgeries both in clinics and in hospitals. Is there an advantage one over the other?
Well, both are acceptable, but the key is if you're going to have surgery done in an outpatient clinic, the clinic needs to be accredited or certified because there are certain standards that an accredited or certified clinic has to rise to in order to be licensed by the public health department in a given state. So that's one of the questions you'd need to ask is the clinic accredited or certified? But certainly the surgery can be done in either place. Many patients just really like the idea of not going into a hospital and having the surgeries performed. Number one, it's more economical to have surgery done in the clinic as opposed to the hospital. Many times by thousands of dollars, it's more economical. Not that there are any shortcuts taken, but we don't have to fund the departments in hospitals that tend to lose money, like the emergency room and sometimes OB and sometimes pediatrics and other departments that lose money. They have to make it up in the operating room. And so oftentimes that's the reason operating room costs are a little bit more. But the most important thing is that the doctor feel comfortable with where he or she is working. And one of the things I like about working in my own clinic is that I'm surrounded by people who know exactly what I intend to do. They anticipate what the surgeon's going to do, and I think many times the surgery goes more smoothly. Also, there is oftentimes a lesser chance of infection in an accredited outpatient surgery center because you're dealing with well people and not people who are ill or sick or recovering from other serious conditions, which can sometimes spread infection down the hall or to another floor. So there are advantages to both, and there are times that when we have a person whose medical condition requires that they be monitored a little more closely, or maybe they're a little bit in the upper age bracket, or maybe in the younger age bracket, children, we take them to the hospital because we think sometimes hospitals are better equipped to deal with those conditions. But in our case, about 90% of all of our surgery is done on an outpatient basis in our center.
Dr. McCollough, what advice would you give one that's seeking a plastic surgeon?
Well, it's a tough decision because there are a lot of doctors who perform appearance-enhancing surgery and do it quite well. But I guess in selecting a doctor, whether it's a cosmetic surgeon or a cardiologist or a gastroenterologist, whatever it is, I think it's important that the patient actually go interview the doctor. Many times the patients feel somewhat, I hate to use the word intimidated, but sometimes they feel a little uncomfortable asking the doctor pointed questions. But it's your body. You have every right to ask any question that you want, and you have a right to deserve, or you deserve to get a straight answer. The kinds of questions that I certainly would ask if I were going to have a procedure, whether it's a cosmetic operation or a non-cosmetic procedure, is this. Doctor, tell me how many of the operations that I'm talking to you about have you done in your career? How many do you do in the average year? How many do you do in the average month? who's going to be doing my surgery? Are you personally going to be doing the surgery? Are you going to have an assistant, and what will that assistant's role be? You deserve to know the answer to that. Tell me about the cost. What do the costs include? Does it include both my surgery, operating room, anesthesia, postoperative care, or am I going to be billed for care, postoperative follow-up after surgery? And if there's a problem, if a complication arises, are you going to personally take care of it, or would you have to refer me to someone else? These are the kinds of questions that I think that everyone deserves to have answered, whether or not it's a cosmetic procedure or whether or not it's just something medical. What other questions do you have?
I have one. Is there any time that you would say no to a client for a certain procedure if they came to you?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
There are times when particularly plastic surgery is not the appropriate thing for a patient. For example, if a patient is not in good health, we ordinarily would not recommend an elective cosmetic procedure for them. Another reason, if the person is seeking appearance-enhancing surgery for the wrong reasons, we don't recommend surgery for them. You have to have realistic expectations. Plastic surgery will not save a marriage. Plastic surgery will not necessarily vault you into stardom if you don't have a lot of talent. And yet there are people who come in and who bring photographs of famous people and say, I want to look like this person. If I did, I think I could go to Hollywood and be a big star. And so you really have to make sure that those people are in touch with reality. Sometimes you might deny the patient surgery right then, but there are some things that could be done to help them work themselves up to the point where they would be a candidate for surgery. There are times where I recommend counseling for a person who maybe doesn't quite understand the good reasons to have surgery, but there are individuals in our society, professionals, who know how to work with those people. And then after they work with them for a while, they come back and we do surgery, and many times they do beautifully. Sometimes people are too young. Children sometimes are too young to have the types of surgeries that they want. You know, sometimes a mother will bring a child in, a girl that's 12 years old and want her nose corrected. May not be quite ready yet. We may do the evaluation, but put them off for a little while until we think they're mature enough, both physically and psychologically. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Yes, I have a question. Do you get requests from clients for the removal of tattoos?
More and more. As you know, there are a lot of fads in appearance-enhancing procedures. And one of the fads that we're in right now, there have always been tattoos. Tattoos have been around a long time, but people today are having tattoos that you wouldn't expect to be having tattoos. And unfortunately, in many respects, a tattoo is permanent. And life changes. And the same people you associate with, the same value system you have at age 19 may not be the same value system in individuals you deal with when you're 28 or 38 or 48. So yes, there are people coming in for having tattoos removed. Very difficult to remove a tattoo, particularly if it's done by a real artist, because a good tattoo artist puts the depth of the pigment in different levels of the skin, and sometimes very, very deep. The most effective ways are a procedure called dermabrasion. We talked about that earlier in terms of removing scars, where you buff off with a little brush that spins around. You buff off the top layer of skin, you put a gauze pad over it, and some of the pigment works its way up into the gauze pad. And oftentimes you can turn the pad over and see the outline of the tattoo. But you almost never get rid of it completely. Also, you hear about laser tattoo removal. Now, some of those work very, very well. But I've seen some tattoos, particularly with permanent makeup, lip liner and eyeliner and that sort of thing, mascara lines, not mascara lines, but eyeliner. And people have had those lasered, and many times they turn from a dark color to a bright red. And so there are lasers that will actually make certain tattoos worse. And it's important that if you desire to have tattoos modified, that you really look into the procedures, the experience of the operator, and ask him or her, what experience have you had personally with the kind of tattoos that I'm talking with you about? So the answer to your question is yes, we're seeing that more and more, and I think we've just only seen the tip of the iceberg I think as years go by, we're going to see more and more people coming in to want to have some of these tattoos that look real cute when you're 19 years old. May not be quite so cute in some areas when you're 39 or 49 years old. Does that answer your question? Thank you. There are two stories that I want to leave you with now. One is the story of the rock. There was a man whose boss or master told him to go out into this particular place on his farm, a ranch, and there was a large boulder there. And he told him, every day I want you to go there and I want you to push on that rock all day long. So the man went out and he pushed and he pushed and he pushed. And then a passerby came by and stood there and watched him for a few minutes. And he said, "What in the heck are you doing?" He said, "I'm pushing on the rock." And he said, "You must be crazy. Why are you doing it?" And he said, "Because the man that I trust told me to come push on the rock." He said, "Well, you're an idiot. I wouldn't push on the rock." And so the man sat down for a while, and his boss or master came by, and he said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I've decided I don't need to push on this rock anymore." And he said, "Trust me, push on the rock." And he said, "I'm not able to budge it. I've never been able to budge it." He said, "Look at yourself. Look at your arms. Look at your back." And all of a sudden, he first paid attention that he was getting stronger and stronger and stronger every day when he pushed on that rock. So the man said, "Keep pushing on the rock." Well, one day, he pushed and pushed and pushed until the rock rolled over. And underneath the rock was a treasure. And so the moral of the story is that sometimes we don't think we're getting anywhere. We're pushing against immovable objects. But many times as we are, we're making ourselves stronger. We're making ourselves stronger physically, mentally, and spiritually. Because the body is the servant of the mind. And if we believe in what we're doing and we do it well, then we generally have a good and positive outcome. And the final story that I'm going to leave you with today is the story of a student, a teacher, and a butterfly. We all have teachers in life. Certain people who believe in us and who encourage us to do the right thing. But oftentimes we test those teachers, and that's what this story is all about. The story is that a bright young lad approached his teacher, and in his hands he had cupped a butterfly. He went to the teacher and said, "If you're as smart as everybody says you are, you should be able to tell me whether this butterfly that I have here in my hand is alive or dead." Well, the teacher was pretty wise. And he looked the young man in the eye and he said, "My son, the butterfly can be whatever you want it to be." He knew that if he said dead, the boy would open his hands and let the butterfly fly away. If he said it's alive, he would crush it. The butterfly can be whatever you choose it to be. And we are all butterflies. We are in control of our destiny. When we were created on this earth, we were given something that is immeasurable, and that is the gift of free will. We, among all the animals, have the ability to choose and to create our destiny. The rest of the animal kingdom really functions through just instinct is the word I'm looking for. But man is given the ability to look, to assess, to think, to plan, to change, to make better. And that is our mission in life. And so as we leave from here today, let us keep in mind that sometimes, although the objects may seem immovable, if we just keep pushing long enough, there's a treasure underneath. Thank you.